We're in number 16. Look at where we've come. In chapter 14, they said we shouldn't go in because there's giants in the land. So they decide not to. So God punishes them. They said, oh, never mind, we're going to go. So Moses says, don't do it because God's no longer with you. And they decide to go. And so their punishment is they're going to wander for 40 years. And I raised the question, is that punishment or is it actually God's grace? To give them plenty of time to really think through and perhaps change their hearts and also prepare the next generation to come in. So the last verse in chapter 14 is God sent the Canaanites and totally destroyed them. And then the very next verse, chapter 15, last week, a surprise. When you go into the land, he just destroyed them. And he says, when you go into the land. And so this is where we talked about God, his patience, his promises are incredible. He never goes back on a promise. You are going into the land. You're just going to wait 40 years. And by the way, it won't be you men. You're going to die in the desert. But you're going to make it in the land. So he reminds them, when you get into the land, I want you to make these offerings. And the offerings he reminds them are the well-to-do offerings. They're the offerings of thanksgiving and things like that. You're going to make it into the land. Okay? And then last week we had that famous passage on in Leviticus, the sin offering was for unintentional sin. And so the question is, what about sin that's done out of rebellion, out of blasphemy, or in Hebrew, raises the right hand against God? And he said there is no sacrifice for that sin. They're to be cut off. And right after that, you have the story of the man who breaks the Sabbath. So he says, kill him. So they do that. He finishes the chapter with a very little interesting paragraph, which we didn't look at next week. Sew tassels on your clothing. Why? Why would you do that? Because after 13 months of hearing Leviticus and hearing God's love and seeing God taking care of them, they can't remember. It's very much like wearing a wedding ring. This reminds me of how much I love my wife. It reminds me that God has given me somebody special to get in my face when I need it, to love me, to do all those wonderful things. This reminds me of that. So it's astonishing to me when I am traveling, I see guys take their wedding rings off, mostly guys, sometimes women, take their wedding rings off when they go into a place. And it's like, that's interesting. This is a reminder. Put tassels on your garments to remember the covenant. Remember my love for you and my care for you. So you think they would be very grateful, don't you? Well, okay, the very next verse. Korah, son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and certain Reubenites, Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, they become insolent, and so they rise up against Moses. Boy, they're just not learning their lesson, are they? It's just one chapter after another. And each one we get to learn something about God, and we get to learn something about these people. You're getting a glimpse into this ancient world, is what's happening. Okay? The Lord only speaks through Moses throughout this whole wandering section. Okay? He only speaks through Moses, but these biblical ethics that have taken root, they have not taken root, that come through the Mosaic Law. Remember I said last week the Mosaic Law was unique among the ancient world law codes because it's doing something that the ancient law codes didn't do. It's reestablishing dignity at all levels of creation. So criminals, males who have committed crimes, they've lost their rights. Women who had no rights. Okay, children, slaves, foreigners, even creation when you go into the land. Let the land rest every 7 years. The reason why they went into exile for 70 years was because of all the years that they didn't let the land rest. That was a prescribed number by God. And even the animals, the righteous person takes care of their animals. And so these types of dignity statements are not found in any other law code. Okay? So the Mosaic Law was very unique in world history in changing the course of how we think about things. The West, we adopted these values and ethics. The East did not. So you don't have things like dignity and things like that in the East and the Asian nations. So, but they've only been out of Egypt for about maybe 14, 15 months now, maybe a year and a half. And it hasn't taken hold. It hasn't taken root. They're still living out the way they were raised, the way they understood in the Egyptian nation when they were slaves. They still don't trust the Lord. After all that he's done for them, they keep saying, "Can we just go back? At least we'll be fed there," right? But you realize the Lord's taking care of you, don't you? But isn't that a lot like us? Don't we struggle? Is the Lord going to take care of me in this situation? I just get laid off. What am I going to do? I remember getting laid off from Colorado Christian University. Surprise of my life. They laid off, 28, 29 people. I was one of them. And I went home, sat in my closet, and cried for 10 minutes. I said, "Okay, God, now where are we going?" Right? What happens next? It scares us, doesn't it? We're frightful. And so they keep diverting back to that old sin nature. They haven't quite figured it out. Their faith in God is not genuine. In fact, when you read through the Old Testament carefully, what you discover is their faith in God as a nation never was real. Never was. Even David, when you read the Psalms, he understood. He was the greatest king. He understood that the only reason God was blessing the nation was because of his faith. He knew that the nation did not believe. And we're seeing it lived out right here. So the first question that comes up is, do you really believe? I asked you last week when we finished, when we talked about, Rob Darla's departure and mine soon after theirs. What does that look like in the future? I said, do you really trust the Lord as a church? Do you really believe Ephesians 3, to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond what we ask or even imagine? Do you really believe that God is going to bring people to lead you better than the two of us? I do. I believe it. Do you really believe that? Do you really trust the Lord? You see, these chapters get to the very heart of faith and rebellion. What do we really believe? I know what we say we believe. One of the things we teach in the classroom with our doctoral students is that everybody has two faiths. They have a formal faith. Here's what I say I believe. Do all things without grumbling and complaining. And then they have a familiar faith, a faith they live with. Right? I'm going to complain. I don't think we should get a divorce. I'm going to get a divorce. I should trust God. He's sovereign. I'm going to complain every time I don't get my way. The further apart those are, that's called hypocrisy. And that's one of the things this young generation is rebelling against so strongly, is they've seen it in us. The closer we bring those together, where our life actually represents what we say we believe, then you begin to experience joy. Because joy is supernatural. It comes from the Holy Spirit. It's fruit of the Spirit. That's why we're asking these questions. Do you really believe? So I invited you to come with us on a journey as elders and watch the Lord do something beyond what you can't even imagine how good it is. And this all comes out right here through this. It's interesting in this verse because he said Dathan and Abiram, Korah. The rebellion of Korah comes up again in Numbers. We're going to see it again in important ways. So they rise up, and it says, the NIV says they became insolent. Okay? Now, this is a tough passage to translate in Hebrew. Your different translations say different things. Okay? Because they're not quite sure how to do it. Because all it says is they took. That's all it says. They took. They came to Moses and they took. And they started accusing him. So they took and they rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders who had been appointed members of the council. This is a strong rebellion. They're trying to pull a coup. Well, they've already tried it earlier. Remember when Aaron and Miriam tried it? And they got in trouble. Okay? So they came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy." Okay, now, they're using the covenant against Moses. Let's back up to Exodus 19. He says, and we're only 14 months before this, to the nation, "If you obey me, I'll make you a kingdom of priests, a holy nation." So their interpretation is, we're there. We're now the holy people of God. We're the special people of God. Who are you? Who do you think you are? Right? And that's what they said. You've gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly? So they took, but we don't know what they took. So this group of people come and they took something. And they said, "Who do you think you are? We're all holy." Okay? We're just as good as you. We're just as good as you. What did they take? So Moses, boy, he issues a deadly challenge. When Moses heard this, verse 4, he fell face down. He said to Korah and all his followers, in the morning, the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy, and he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses, he will cause to come near him. You, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. Take the censers. Now we know what they brought. You see, the censers were reserved for the priests. So carry the incense. Okay? What they're doing is they're claiming priests to be priests. Now you may remember back earlier in Numbers that there were 4 children of Levi. The 3 sons had responsibilities to carry the different parts of the tabernacle, but the daughter gave birth to Aaron and Moses, and the priestly line came through Aaron. Okay? So the other 3 groups of Levites were not priests. They had responsibilities. Just like in the church, we talked at that time that every one of us has responsibilities. All right? I have a responsibility as a pastor and a teacher to be up here with you. I don't have to do anything to get glory. It just comes. If I do a good job, it comes. So part of what I like to do is say, let's get Rachel up here. Let's get JT up here. Let's get the kids up here. Let's get Rob. Let's say thank you for what they do with the music. Let's share that glory around, okay? Because they don't get it as naturally as I do because I'm here up front. And so every one of you has gifts from the Lord to be used to bless us. Every one of you is what makes this church healthy. It's what makes it strong, is because you all get involved in some way. Used to be the rule in churches with the 80-20 rule. 20% of the people did 80% of the work. They've now revised it. It's now the 90-10. 10% of the people do 90% of the work. Every year when it comes time to look at the register of all of our members, as we're getting ready for our annual meeting, I go through and I look, and I think we're sitting at about 80-20 or 85-15. 85% of the people do the work. I mean, this church is fantastic. Every one of you is involved. Raise your hand if you're involved in some ministry. I don't care. If it's sweeping a floor, children's ministry, just raise your hand. You show up to clean up and all you do. Look at that. Look at all the hands that go up. Okay? Churches don't have that. We do. And so we have this whole situation here where these 3 tribes are not happy. Well, why can't we be the priests? All right? There's jealousy. You're getting a glimpse into this ancient world of what it looked like before these values of Leviticus come into play and really take hold. Some of you have remarked, and I think I see it, we're watching our own country perhaps on the verge of losing some of the core values that are important to us. And it's producing things that we're not comfortable with, isn't it? We don't like some of the things. Some of them it's good, but not all of it. It's creating uncertainty among us. We've talked about that over the last couple of years. Well, here we have this right here. They're challenging Moses, okay? So he says, take the censers which are reserved for the priests. In other words, you're claiming to be a priest. This is what they took. They took the censers and came to Moses and says, who died and left you God? Well, God did. Okay? And we want to be priests too. You've gone way too far. So he said, all right, take those censers, and tomorrow, verse 7, put burning coals and incense in them before the Lord. Whoa, stop. Let's go back now to Leviticus 8, 9, and 10. 8, 9, and 10 is the priesthood, where he's teaching. Remember, he's going to make them all priests. So he establishes a priesthood not to be better than the people, but to show them what it means to be priests, because they all want to be priests. I'm not better than you. Okay? Rob's not better than you. Our staff and elders are not better than you. But we work really hard to live lives to model for you what it looks like to be priests in this world today. Because we are that. We're a holy nation, a kingdom of priests. And so that's why they did it. So the 2 sons in chapter 10 of Aaron, okay, the two of the 4 sons of Aaron, they don't think this is so not a big deal. So they take their censers and they put different kind of incense on it. That's just right in God's face. And God strikes him dead, right on the spot. Then he says to Aaron, don't mourn them. That was my decision. Don't mourn them. And so Moses is challenging them to do what they had just seen happen a few months before. This is a deadly challenge. Go ahead. That's why I titled this, Take the Wheel If You Dare. Go ahead. You want to be in the priesthood and carry all the responsibilities that go with it? Go ahead. You take the censers and present them to the Lord. That's what he says in verse 7. The man the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone way too far now. You've overstepped the boundaries that God has put in place. So, it's obvious they're trying to get to the priesthood. Verse 8, Moses also said to Korah, now listen, you Levites, isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near himself to do the work at the Lord's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? He has brought you and all your fellow Levites near himself. But now you're trying to get the priesthood too. It is against the Lord that you and all your followers have banded together. Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him? In other words, you're on grumbling against the Lord. You know, it's interesting having a PhD from a respectable seminary. Judy and I both do, and I know she's felt it because we've talked about it. Sometimes I'll tell people that say, what do you do? I'm a pastor and I teach. Oh, really? What's your, did you go to seminary? Yeah, I did a master's and a PhD. Oh, well, I have that knowledge too, or I'm just as smart as you, or whatever. And it's like, wow, what drives people to do that? It's so astonishing. I don't really care what your education level is. And I don't care where it came from. Do you love the Lord? But yet it's astonishing in our world, in the academic world, how there's this hierarchy. And here's how it works. You have an MA, that's pretty good. An MDiv a little better. A THM now, that's on top. I have a THM, by the way. Okay? Just thought I'd put that out there. That's a 4-year master's. And then you can get a DMin. That's pretty good. Okay? Brian Leeds is getting a DMin. But then you get a PhD. We're even better yet. Okay? Then you get a PhD. Which school did it come from? All right? So I've only done this once in my life because it was way too fun to do it. My PhD came from Dallas Seminary. I was in Cambridge, England, sitting with a bunch of the other New Testament PhDs. They didn't know I had a PhD. They knew I was a pastor. And they said, so you're a pastor. Did you go to seminary? And I said, yeah, I did. And they said, where did you go? It's like, oh, I can't pass this up. It's too good. Maybe I was demon-possessed. I don't know. And so I said, have you ever heard of Dan Wallace? He's in the top 3 to 5 text-critical experts in the world. And they all sat up a little bit straighter. Do you know Dr. Wallace? Better than I want to. He was on my comprehensive oral from my PhD. How about Buse Fanning? Another top guy in grammar, Greek grammar. Taught me advanced Greek grammar. And he wrote his dissertation was on verbal aspect. I know you all know what that means. Okay, and they said, yeah, I know you do. You don't have to raise your hand, Judy. So, and they said, do you know Dr. Fanning? He was my advisor. And they were sitting up straight and they go, you went to Dallas Seminary? I go, yeah, I did. What are you doing in the pastorate? Think about that. What are you doing in the pastorate? And I just laughed. They didn't get it. And I said, think about the education continuum. Okay? I pointed to one. I'd say, you're an expert in the 9th century Coptic manuscript in Luke, right? He goes, right. And I said, great. I love what you're doing. It's wonderful. I could do it. I just don't want to. I was trained to. That's not where my heart beats. And I said, you're going to write. It's going to appear in a peer-reviewed monograph, a peer-reviewed commentary, and then I get the privilege of teaching it to housewives and nurses and business leaders and teachers and middle schoolers because I know what it means. You know what? For the next 6 weeks, one at a time, they took me out to a pub. That's what you do in Britain. Do you think I'd be a good pastor? I don't know. Do you love your manuscripts more or your people more? If you love people more, go into the pastorate. If you don't, please don't go into the pastorate. Right? And that's the gift that I bring you, is that I can read all the work these scholars are doing. I could do it. I just don't want to do it. You don't want to either, do you? Yeah. What are you talking about? You wrote a commentary. She wrote a commentary. It's worth reading, by the way. So there's this hierarchy that occurs in the academy, and that's what we have right here. Oh, It's not good enough for you to help clean up the tabernacle, is it? Now you want to be a priest. Okay? Think about that. And they had just seen Abihu and Nadab killed for doing this very thing. Said, go ahead, take your censers, put altar on it, incense, and offer it to the Lord, and see what happens. It's a deadly challenge that he gave them. So the leaders are jealous. Verse 12, when Moses summoned Dathan and Abiram, but they said, we're not going to come. They stayed in their tents. Later on, he has to go to them, by the way. Isn't it enough that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? They're blaming Moses that they can't go into the land. It's like, were you awake 2 days ago when God just punished all of you and killed a bunch of people? Weren't you awake for that? They're blaming Moses. And now you also want to lord it over us? Why would they say that? Because all throughout this, the Lord said to Moses, tell the people this. They're not trusting him. They're jealous. How do we know that God is telling you that? We don't trust you. You see, these values that the Mosaic Law brought into world history hasn't impacted his own people. These really good laws on treating people with dignity, respect, caring for them. Okay? You really want to go back to slavery? We're going to get new leaders who will take us into the promised land. They're blaming Moses. Moreover, you haven't brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey or given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Do you want to treat these men like slaves? It's kind of interesting because the Hebrew says, do you want to gouge out their eyes too? Apparently that's what they did to slaves. No, we will not come. We're not even going to show you respect to come when you ask us to come. So they're jealous. Moses is the reason they haven't entered the promised land. And then in verse 15, that's the only time in the Pentateuch we hear this of Moses. He becomes very angry. Never says he gets angry at the golden calf, but it doesn't say he's very angry. Here he is incensed, white rage. And he says, Lord, do not accept their offering. I have not taken so much as a donkey from them, nor have I wronged any of them. So then the story goes on. Okay, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. Where you all appear tomorrow at the tent of meeting. You bring your censers, put them in there, and we'll see what the Lord does. Okay, so they do that. So the Lord responds. Verse 23. The Lord said to Moses, say to the assembly, move away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. These are leaders. You guys better get back. Stand back and watch what happens. Verse 27, they move away from the tents, as the Lord has said. And so God takes responsibility. Remember last week? What happens to the person who sins out of blasphemy or rebellion? God said there's no sacrifice. There's nothing they can do. It's my responsibility. In other words, there is a level of sin where God takes control. You know, all the rest of the sin, we get to wrestle with it together as a church. Ananias and Sapphira, it's a good example. There is a level of rebellion and blasphemy where God takes control, and it results in some level of death. Okay? Premature death. Doesn't happen often. It's sin that's out of blasphemy. And I don't ever see that in this church, in any of you. We sin out of weakness because we're humans, and God's very gracious and forgiving. So, God took responsibility. And so in verse 30, he says, there's a fun little thing in here. In verse 29, Moses is talking. Verse 29, he said, this is how you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all the things that was not my idea. He's reminding them, I didn't ask for this job. If these men die a natural death and suffer the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about something totally new and the earth opens its mouth, in Hebrew it's really fun. If the Lord creates a creation, they've never seen it. He does something no one has ever seen. And that's why it's translated, if the Lord does something new, totally new, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with everything that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the realm of the dead, then you will know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt. As soon as he finished saying all this, the ground split apart The earth opened its mouth and swallowed all of them and their households together, their 3 tenths. They went down alive into the realm of the dead with everything. Okay, they perished and were gone from the community. Now in verse 34, it's pretty interesting because the rest of the people, at their cries, they could hear the people dying. The group of people, they could hear them screaming in panic. They heard it as the earth collapsed over the top of them. And they were terrified and they ran. They ran. So then the Lord's not done. Verse 35, and the fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense. You see, these were people who were acting out of rebellion, out of jealousy, out of blasphemy. And that's what he talked about in Numbers 15. If you go on sinning by shaking your fist at God, then there's no sacrifice for that sin. You get to deal with the Lord directly. Okay? Now think about Hebrews 10:26. Think about this imagery. If we go on sinning willfully after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sin, but a terrifying expectation of judgment. Think about that. You think these people were terrified? I think they were. You think Saul was terrified when he brought Samuel up and Samuel says this very day God has demanded your life? David, after Bathsheba laid on the floor, begged and pleaded with God not to take the life of his son. Moses, you're not going to enter the promised land. You're going to die. He had to live with that for 40 years as he led all these rebellious people. I screwed up too. And look what happens. You see, there is a line in the sand that the Bible clearly lays out. Fortunately, I don't ever see that attitude in any of you, or we would have had a talk a long time ago. I don't see that. That's what we do as elders and staff. We watch. You know what? You're just common, normal people. We all sin out of weakness. But just remember how you guard your heart. Okay? So what happened next? What happens after this? Humility? Rebellion? What? Well, you have to wait till next week to find that out. Actually, it's the week after next. Next week I'll be in Cambodia. So I'll be joining Jeannie Johnson and some of the other people from the churches that are going there doing a pastor's conference. So the defiant sins were too serious to be handled by people. The sacrificial system involves people. It was too much. And because none of us are God, and we don't have all the wisdom that we need to handle this level of sin. And so God takes responsibility when your sin gets to a certain level. I mean, what makes Moses so remarkable? This is not a question, I've argued this for several weeks, of salvation, because he blasphemed God and it cost him his life, and yet he's at the Mount of Transfiguration. He did make it into the promised land in a glorified state. And so I'm not worried about that part of it. I'm worried about your lives. Okay? Sin draws life out of you. It sucks you dry. That's what sin does. It's not about judgment. And sometimes God does get in your face in a hard way. That's why I've said over the years many, many times, if you're struggling with sin, okay, that's fine. Just don't stay there. Come talk to me or one of our staff or elders. Okay, I don't particularly care what sin it is that you're involved in. I'm not that curious unless it'll help me be a good pastor to guide you out of it. But don't stay there. It's okay. It's okay to come. I've had it many, many, many times in 12 years. I'm sleeping with another woman. Oh, you got your life in a mess now, don't you? Okay? I mean, the sins, I wish I could tell you some of the ones I've heard over the years. Don't stay there. Don't be ashamed. Okay? Come deal with it. So, one more thought. James 3, verse 1. Let not many of you become teachers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. This is the verse that captures my attention every Sunday, because I have the privilege of teaching you and the moral responsibility to guide you closer to the Lord. I've told the elders many times over the years, I already know that by 5 o'clock today, you're not going to remember what passage we were talking about. I don't mind that. Okay? We learned that in seminary. Don't ask that. All I care about is what Rob and I do up here. Do you feel like you want to take one step closer to the Lord because of what we've done? That's what's important to us. I only have two goals every Sunday, they're the same. Do you want to take one step closer to the Lord because we model for you what it means to love the Lord? And the second goal is, do you feel a little more intrigued by the mystery in here? To want to know the Lord more and want to know the story? I can't answer that question. All I can do is exercise my gifts, but that's my prayer every Sunday. And I know what the verses say. But the other one relates to you. Hebrews 13, at the end of the book. Okay? Have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority. Okay? To those who lead you. Because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. Peter said that in 1 Peter 5. It's just not up there on the screen. I'm accountable for your souls. All right? If I treat you harshly, then I'm going to be held accountable for that. But if I treat you in a way that says, come on, just come. Come with me. Come and see the Lord. Come and taste and see. David said that he is good. All right? Do this so that their work will be a joy and not a burden, for that would be of no benefit to you. By the way, when you became a member, this was one of the requirements, the verses we talk about. So I asked you last week, I read Psalm 23. He leads us beside still waters. Right now, for many of you, the fact that two of us are leaving, who you love, you see us all every Sunday, is a turbulent time. What's going to happen? Some of you are nervous and frightened. Some of you are, praise Jesus, when are you leaving? Some of you are unsure. And that's why I asked you last week, are you willing to just walk with us? Let's just go. Okay, follow the elders. Do you really believe God has somebody better for you than us? We believe it. The two of us. Okay? We believe it. Do you really trust God that He cares very much for this church? Come with us on a journey and watch the Lord do what's unspeakable, what's beyond our imagination. So that my prayer is that 2 months after I'm gone, you won't remember my name. We're going on a journey. We're not going to go like Korah and the Israelites. We're going to go like Moses. We're going to stand firm. We're going to trust the Lord. Father, thank you for being an incredible God, for being so good to us. Thank you for your kindness. And Lord, you know my heart, you know Rob's heart. We've talked so many times. And the elders, you know that. Staff, we know what you're going to do to this church is to bless the church. Because it's your church and you love these people more than we do. And we love them a lot. So thank you, Lord, for your kindness to walk with us on this journey and guide us and lead us, comfort us, take care of us, and teach us. In your Son's name, Jesus, we pray because he's our high priest. Amen.